Few things are quite so haunting as a doomed ship's last moments, except maybe the final messages sent out by its crew. On April 16, 2014, the MV Sewol ferry capsized in South Korea. Those who survived recounted a traumatic and hectic experience as the boat started sinking. One passenger told the Associated Press, "The rescue wasn't done well. We were wearing life jackets. We had time. If people had jumped into the water, they could have been rescued, but we were told not to go out." Another survivor told a local South Korean TV station, "The announcement told us that we should stay still, but the ship was already sinking and there were a lot of students who did not get out of the ship." In the end, 304 people died. Since there were hundreds of students on board and some time passed before the boat sank, many sent panicked text messages to family members. One mother told the AFP that her daughter wrote, "We're putting on our life vests. They're telling us to wait and stay put, so we're waiting." Another mother received a text saying, "This might be the last chance to say I love you." The ship Gulf Livestock 1 had 5,910 lives on board when it set sail from New Zealand on August 14, 2020, 43 humans and the rest cows. Heading for China on September 2nd, the ship hit a typhoon. When Sarah Mainprize sent a concerned WhatsApp message to her brother, 27-year-old crew member William Mainprize, he tried to reassure her, writing, "Should be fine, we're a big boat." However, she later told Sky News that while he seemed fine when speaking to her, he had separately messaged friends to say that the ship was taking on water. Mainprize and 40 others died in the sinking of Gulf Livestock 1. According to the two survivors who were rescued, a massive wave swamped the ship, resulting in engine failure. In the aftermath, the tragedy suffered by the crew members' families was made worse when the search was called off after only one body was located.
Even though you hold out a little bit of hope, but the best hope probably now is that they can at least find his body at least.
A number of groups also voiced their upset over the cows that died alongside the crew. Animal rights organization SAFE told Sky News that the animals should never have been at sea. This wasn't the first time thousands of animals had died while being transported by ship, and the government of New Zealand had promised to do something about the issue just a year prior to the sinking. On September 17, 2019, the Bourbon Rhode left port in the Canary Islands and headed for Guyana. 8 days into the voyage, it became clear that the ship was about to sail right through a Category 3 hurricane, but the crew didn't change course, despite already suffering obvious leaks from unfinished repairs. The next day, disaster struck. The Bourbon Rhode sank, and only 3 of the 14 crew were saved in a rescue mission. 7 bodies were never recovered. About an hour after the first distress signal, the ship sent out a message that it was flooding. It read, "We have no more engines. They are all down. All crew muster ready and on standby." An hour after that, the Bourbon Rhode's last message reported, "Life rafts not possible to launch. Very rough seas. Swell 10 meters or more." According to an interim report compiled by the government of Luxembourg, the disaster was avoidable since it was obvious before the ship sailed that it was not seaworthy. In fact, one of the people originally hired to crew the vessel walked off the job because of the unacceptable condition of the Bourbon Rhode. While the person hired to replace them agreed to board, even they noted issues with the ship. The fact that most of the crew was inexperienced would not have helped when things began to go wrong. There's no sinking more famous than that of the ocean liner Titanic on April 15, 1912, thanks in part to Hollywood.
I'm the king of the world!
The ship that was said to be unsinkable hit an iceberg in the middle of the North Atlantic on its maiden voyage. An estimated 1,500 people died, while 706 survivors were rescued. When disaster struck, the ship's telegraph operators begged for assistance. The Titanic called to the nearby Carpathia, "Come at once, we have struck a berg. It's a CQD, old man." Other messages sent as the situation deteriorated grew more desperate. One read, "We are putting passengers off in small boats. Women and children in boats cannot last much longer, losing power." The Titanic famously sent out an SOS call on the night of April 15th. The Morse code signal was a relatively new way to indicate distress. Not many telegraph operators used it yet, instead sticking with the older CQD. One of the ship's telegraph operators who survived, Harold Bride, told the New York Times that he joked darkly with his superior Jack Phillips that he should use the new call because it might be his last chance to send it. Like so many others, Phillips went down with the ship. In 1861, a bottle washed up on Eust, an island in Scotland's Outer Hebrides. A local found a message inside which made its way to the New York Times. It read, "On board the Pacific from Liverpool to New York. Ship going down. Great confusion on board. Icebergs around us on every side. I know I cannot escape. I write the cause of our loss, that friends may not live in suspense. The finder of this will please get it published. William Graham." The newspaper also explained how they had looked into the mystery of where this final message might have come from. Apparently, there were several ships named Pacific at that time, but after contacting shipping companies and checking passenger lists for the name of the man who wrote it, reporters determined it was probably a boat that had left England for New York 5 years earlier. Of course, it's not that nobody at the time noticed an entire ship had vanished in the Atlantic, but this was not nearly as uncommon an occurrence as you might hope. Until a message in the bottle was discovered, no one had any idea what had become of the Pacific. 186 people had been on board when it left Liverpool, all of whom no doubt perished in the sinking.
Over 50 people are feared dead after a Korean fishing vessel sank in the Bering Sea off Russia's far eastern coast.
The fishing boat Oryong 501 was sailing in the Bering Sea on December 1, 2014, when the crew realized they were taking on water. At first, it seemed like a temporary setback, as they were able to borrow a pump from a passing ship, but it quickly became clear this was a much bigger problem and that their lives were in serious danger. The Korean media outlet Hankyoreh listened to the final radio messages from the ship. The captain, Kim Gae-won, was speaking to Lee Yang-woo, the captain of yet another nearby ship, who was also a friend and former co-worker. Kim told Lee, "Yang-woo, I wanted to say goodbye before the end." His fellow captain tried to motivate Kim to keep going, imploring him, "Don't say that. Get all the crew off the ship safely and then make sure that you make it out alive as well." But Kim knew the inevitable was imminent. His last words were, "All the lights inside the ship are off. After what I've done to the crew, how could I let myself survive?" While family members of the crew held out hope that they might somehow have survived, rescuers were only able to save 7 people. Of the remaining 53 crew members, 26 bodies were never recovered. Around the turn of the 20th century, Alaska's coastline saw 87 boats wreck and sink in less than 40 years. Not all of them led to great tragedy, of course, and in at least one instance, there were no casualties at all. Sadly, this was far from the case in the sinking of the SS Princess Sophia. While the steamship was technically only allowed to take on 250 passengers and crew, this rule was regularly ignored, since 500 people could fit comfortably on board. When the ship departed from Skagway on October 23, 1918, it did so with 343 passengers and 21 crew members. It was particularly busy since winter was coming and many people were heading further south before it got too cold. However, the ship soon found itself in a snowstorm and, blinded, sailed off course. Hours after departing, in the early hours of October 24th, the Princess Sophia rammed straight into a reef. The ship had been in similar situations before, so since it wasn't taking on water, the crew simply waited for the storm to pass so those on board could be rescued. However, after being stuck for 40 hours, the ship shifted and sank. Before it went down, the ship's crew radioed, "For God's sake, hurry." All 364 souls on board were lost. In the early morning of December 14, 2022, the captain of a fishing boat in the middle of the English Channel woke up to panicked screams. What he saw when he got on deck was shocking. He later told Sky News, "It was like something out of a Second World War movie. There were people in the water everywhere, screaming." He and his crew spent the next few hours pulling men, women, and children onto their boat. While Americans might be more familiar with the political arguments over immigration at their country's southern border, Europe also sees desperate migrants take extreme risks to reach safer shores. Often, this means crossing the Mediterranean or the English Channel.
We think there's maybe 12, 13 on board, a couple of small children at the front and a couple of women.
The boats used are usually overloaded or less than seaworthy, which means they occasionally sink. In this instance, it was a small boat with 47 migrants on board that had set sail from France in the middle of the night. As the boat began to take on water, one of the passengers left a voice message for a French migrant charity. They said, "We are on the boat and we have a problem. Please help. We have children and a family on the boat. Water is coming in the boat and we don't have anything. Please help me, bro." 4 migrants died, with others hospitalized in critical condition. The SS Beaverford was never supposed to be a warship, but desperate times called for desperate measures. When World War II began, this cargo ship, owned by the Canadian Pacific Railway, was requisitioned by the British government. While it was still used to transport goods, it was also fitted with heavy weaponry, just in case. 16 journeys across the Atlantic with important war cargo turned out to be mostly uneventful. 17th, however, was not. The Beaverford left Canada on October 28, 1940, sailing for England. About a week later, the convoy in which the vessel was traveling ran into a German battleship, the Admiral Scheer. At first, the Beaverford didn't take part in the ensuing battle, instead holding back and radioing what was happening to other ships. Eventually, though, the Admiral Scheer trained its guns on the Beaverford, and the latter ship sustained serious damage. It sank slowly, thanks in part to the fact that it was transporting buoyant lumber. But the crew very quickly realized that there was no way out. The captain of the German ship heard the final message from the ship it was attacking. It read, "It is our turn now, so long," the captain and the crew of the SS Beaverford. At that point, the Admiral Scheer fired again. The impact of the torpedo was so explosive that it lifted the bow of the Beaverford out of the water. The ship then finally sank. All 77 on board were killed. On February 4, 1968, while caught in terrible weather off Iceland, the fishing boat Ross Cleveland was hit by a huge wave and tipped onto its side. The crew tried to get out safely, but the skipper seemed to know it was a long shot, sending a last radio message to his cousin. It read, "I'm going over. We are laying over. Help us, lad. I'm going over. Give my love and the crew's love to the wives and families." Only one of the men on board survived. Harry Edam was working on the masts when disaster struck, so he was wearing extremely warm and wind-resistant clothes. The rest of the crew didn't have time to dress for the weather, to the point that some were dressed in short-sleeved shirts. Two of those men saved Edam's life by pulling him into a lifeboat with them. He froze to death soon after, and he drifted alone with their bodies until he was rescued.